Israel has become the first nation to officially recognize the breakaway region of Somaliland, sparking a diplomatic firestorm in the Horn of Africa. The announcement has drawn sharp condemnation from Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who alleges that Somaliland secured recognition by agreeing to host an Israeli military base and resettle displaced Palestinians from Gaza. Somaliland's foreign ministry has denied these false claims, asserting that their engagement with Israel is purely diplomatic and respects international law. For this, we have a global policy analyst, Alexander von Rugen, and geopolitical analyst, Tabenyang Etchu, joining us. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. Let me start with you, Alexander. A huge diplomatic shift. But the question is, why now? What is Israel trying to achieve with this move?
Well, it's kind of ironic that Israel, which is in a heated battle over Gaza in terms of the eyes of the rest of the world, denying statehood for Palestine, is endorsing statehood for another not so close and distant neighbor. I wouldn't say it's a deflection of what's going on in Israel. I think it's a strategic move. They're using the excuse of military advantage to combat the Houthis near the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb, which is a corridor for arms shipments and pirating and nefarious activities in the Red Sea. That's their official excuse. There's rumors of a deal being made to displace Palestinians from Gaza to Somaliland, which from a practical sense would make sense, but we're not allowed to talk about it. So Israel is flatly denying that right now. As far as security goes, America's largest permanent base in Africa is in Djibouti, which is the neighbor of Somaliland. So I don't really think Israel's presence there is as critical as they may say. The fact that it's coming out of the blue, there's no conflict in Somaliland other than, normal conflicts in the Horn of Africa. But as far as a stable, peaceful state, it's got a better governance, it seems, than a lot of its neighbors.
Tabenyang, to what extent does Israel's unilateral recognition of Somaliland undermine the African Union's principle of respecting colonial borders?
The African Union's position. And if you look at what the AU did in 2005, its own fact-finding mission reported that and concluded that the fact that the union between Somaliland and Somalia was never ratified and also malfunctioned when it went into action from 1960 to 1990, made Somaliland's search for recognition historically unique and self-justified. And so it's hard then to argue that it's going to undermine the AU's position of territorial immovability from independence, because Somaliland and Somalia have two distinct internationally recognized borders. So the AU's position is contradictory at this time. And you cannot subject people who do not want to live together because of some myth of sovereignty. There is a need for both Somalia and Somaliland to engage in genuine dialogue in resolving this problem. Israel is just rubbing it in the faces of those countries who recognized the state of Palestine a couple of months ago. I think we anticipated that it was going to be a domino effect with what happened with the recognition of Palestine, that Israel was going to find a way to rub it in the faces of the Western governments and some of the governments in the continent. And Somaliland is providing them that crown that we are here. We are readily available for you to recognize us, irrespective of some of the accusations that are coming from Mogadishu about the deportation of Palestinians there, access to the Red Sea, and potential military bases in Somaliland. So I don't think that it undermines the AU's position because the AU itself had recognized the uniqueness of the situation of Somaliland.
Somalia says it's going to take action. It's not going to lie down. It's made several accusations already, and it's saying they are going to take legal and diplomatic actions against this action. But let's be real. What are their options really in challenging this declaration by Israel?
Is that back to me?
No, Alexander.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Well, the legal ramifications pursuant to the 1933 convention, which it's the declaratory theory of statehood. There's 4 conditions for that. It's defined borders. It has those defined borders. It has a permanent population. It has a government that's functional. They have a constitution. They've operated since 1991, since the revolution, 30 years as such, and they've done it with good governance, other than Somalia, which has been described as a failed state in Mogadishu. So let's not let people in glass houses throw stones. Do they meet the legal criteria pursuant to the convention? Yes. In 1960, when they got their independence from England, Somaliland was declared a state. They merged with the Somaliland, which was an Italian colony 5 days later. They didn't get along. That's back in 1960. They didn't get along. They had a 10-year civil war. In 1991, they then declared their independence, but it's not been officially recognized by the UN. And now here we are. But other than their strategic location, the fact that they've governed themselves quite well, there's no conflict there. This is not a conflict resolution of support. I think Israel's trying to score some points, and it's also showing the AU that they're wrong, as my colleague indicated. I think he's correct on his point as well. Does it instill fear in the AU in other situations? Well, you have the Western Sahara being under rule by Morocco. You have conflicts, obviously, in Sudan. Ethiopia is going through its turmoil. You have Biafra in Nigeria, which could be a contestation over oil. This is not too unusual, but it is a clear case of having already been a state. Palestine was never declared a state. That's one mistake the British colonialists did when they allowed Israel statehood. They should have granted it to Palestine at the same time. It would have resolved a lot of conflicts.
All right, Tabenyang, let's talk a bit about strategy. Somaliland sits just on the Red Sea. They're talking about access to the Red Sea. They're talking about shipping. They're talking about ports. Is there a bigger picture that we are not seeing that's made Israel to make this announcement?
Absolutely, it's not Israel alone, but to dovetail to what my other colleague is saying, you also have a similar situation in the Cameroons with the war in the 2 English-speaking regions called Ambazonia, with territorial boundaries that were set in the 1960s. So it could also be a domino effect. But to answer to your question, you have to understand that the recognition of Somaliland threatens no continental-wide catastrophe, though. The truth is simpler. The Somaliland, 6 million people in that place now are being held hostage, not in principle, but because it threatens economic interests, specific economic interests. Djibouti needs them unrecognized to preserve port monopoly because they are practically controls the commercial activities of Ethiopia through the Red Sea. You have Somalia needs them unrecognized because of its territorial claims and the control of resources, and even the coastline that they have not controlled for the past 34 years. You have Egypt, which is also using its military collaboration with Somalia as leverage in Ethiopia because of their long-standing Nile arguments. And you also have Turkey that has also condemned that. It's not strange that the president of Somalia went directly to Turkey. Turkey also has huge investment in Somalia, and they have a huge military presence. They are also seeking access to the coastline. And I think they are even going to begin sourcing for oil and gas in that coastline. So if you look at it, it's not just what Israel is doing, but what are the potential domino effect for countries in that Horn of Africa. You have China, who has a huge military presence in Djibouti for control of the Horn of Africa. You have the US that is also very interested, like the other colleague said, even though there's a military base in Djibouti, but they see the port of Berbera as strategic and critical in that area. So you see the US came out and was ambiguous, really did not say anything. They say they maintain their previous position of not recognizing Somaliland, but their silence alone is key because they're already making a lot of engagement in the region, potentially moving the base in Djibouti to Somaliland. So we should look at
okay. Just wrap up your thought, yeah.
No, we should look at it as the global positioning of geopolitical powers in the region, not just Israel.
Okay, you mentioned China, and it's curious that the foreign ministry said they did not agree with the decision of Israel and said no country should encourage or support other countries' internal separatist forces for its own selfish interests. My question would be, looking at the bigger picture here, what does it mean for international law? Can a country like Israel just unilaterally recognize a breakaway region just the way it's done now?
It goes back again, if you consider...
No, the question is for Alexander, please.
Well, I think I've touched on that already. I mean, the precedent was set. It's not just deciding one day, oh, we're going to support statehood for this area. I think a lot of people are nervous about that, but they did set a precedent with having statehood back in 1960. They've been basically run as an independent government for the past 30 years or since the 60s. So you can't, you got to compare apples to apples here. You have to ask yourself, why now is Israel suddenly taking this stance? Are they looking for extra investments? What favoritism are they going to get? I think that the theory that it might be to displace Palestinians is a good one, and it's a logical one. It's a predominantly Muslim country. It's not that far from Israel. And here's another fact. All of Israel's neighbors, Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, they don't want any more Palestinians to come in. You know, they could argue, well, by inviting Palestinians, they're supporting Israel's displacement and takeover of Gaza. But I think it's much more deep-rooted in that. They've all had their relative problems with Palestinian military groups in their countries.
All right, Tabenyang, quickly, in 30 seconds, if you can just tell us your thoughts on the implications Africans should be looking at with this declaration, if any.
Other than
the African governments with internal contradictions, Cameroon, for example, you have Nigeria with the Biafra situation, have to be very, very careful. We're entering a phase in history where a single country can come in and torpedo whatever diplomatic relationships that have been established and undermine the status quo. So you can see more and more regions begin to agitate for self-determination, because if they have resources, strategic resources for that matter, then a government from any of these countries can come in and say, yeah, we're going to recognize them and establish some kind of economic or diplomatic relations with that country. I'm looking at the Gulf of Guinea, which is also very strategic. Is that what is going to happen with the situation in Cameroon? So we have to be very careful with what is going on.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time.